what a great result for the Blackcaps. I know it's a draw, and if you just read the scorecard alone, you'd go a draw. But actually, if you were watching it, you watched it right the way through, what a contest.
Well, Laura, in the end, yeah, I will say a terrific result and a great rearguard action that had to happen. So I'm happy with the outcome when it got to that point. Up until then, I have to say I wasn't that chuffed with the way they went about that last day. And throughout our conversation, the next 10 minutes or so about it, you'll probably hear why. I kind of figure I look at it back now, a few hours later, and I think to myself, we are the best test side in the world. We have nothing to hide from. We know how to play this game. We had an opportunity, I believe, at one point in that game to seriously look at winning it, and I don't think we ever did. So I think we might, even though we're still 0-0 on the ledger and we've got a chance to win the series in Mumbai starting in a couple of days' time, I believe we may have let an opportunity go by that don't often present themselves in India.
Hes, do you agree with that? Do you think Smithee's right there? We let a winning opportunity go by?
Well, I think the test matches in India changed so quickly. So, I mean, listening to what Kane said at the end, talked about the fact that, they were going to try and bat to at least the middle of the second session and then sort of reassess. And I think, having been over there and looked at the recent results, I mean, you lose the toss in India 19 times since 2019. Since 2013. Not one side has even drawn a test match that hasn't been rain affected. So that's the first draw since 2013 when the touring side has lost the toss. So it is an incredibly tough place to go, especially to bat on days 4 and 5 or to bat second and fourth. So I think that, Smithee's right in terms of we earned the right to give ourselves a chance to win on the last day. But I still think we had to build that partnership for another hour or so before we could, push our foot down, I guess, and go a little bit harder. And I guess once Tom Latham out, that little chop on off a pretty innocuous delivery to start in that in those conditions on the last day when there was enough turn and bounce. It wasn't as extreme as we've seen it in the past, but it was certainly enough. And against Ashwin and Jadeja and Axar, who's outstanding, there was always probably in the back of the mind where you're going, look, wickets have lost it in clumps this whole test match. So we've got to set ourselves up where the last session we can try and push the win. If you try and do it any earlier and you lost those guys earlier, then you're asking the lower middle order to bat for longer. And we saw how tough it was. So, look, I agree with Smithy in terms of we earned the right to win it, but I don't think we did enough that last day to get ourselves to a point where we could push on.
Well, let's start back at the beginning. And Smithy, I'll start with you. We were bowling first. We talked a lot about the makeup of the side, who the bowlers would be. We had so many spinners in the ranks there. Rachin Ravindra got his debut call-up. But let's talk about Tim Southee and Kyle Jamieson. I want to talk about Tim Southee particularly because he bowled 50 overs in that test match. First innings, he took 5 for 69 and then it was 3 for 75. I read an article during the test match that said he would have to be the most underrated low fuss athlete we have in New Zealand at the moment. Would you agree with that, knowing that you've watched the span of his career, you watched since he debuted when he was an 18-year-old, 19-year-old to now? Do you think he's the most underrated athlete in New Zealand that just flies under the radar?
Well, let me think about that for a second, Laura. You've caught me by surprise. I don't think he's underrated in the areas that count for Tim Southee. I don't think, for one, he's underrated by his teammates. He's certainly not underrated by the opposition, and he's certainly not underrated by selectors and other people around him that are important to him. So if that's if you go looking for outside compliments all the time, you're clearly going to be disappointed in most facets of life. He has been terrific. There's no doubt about that. I'll be the first to say I was one of the people that thought that they should play Wagner instead of him in this test. I thought Tim Southee's workload throughout the T20 World Cup in those oppressive conditions had been high. I thought Wagner was perfect in terms of his ability to slow the game down with his deliberate tactics, etc., which India would not like. I thought there was a lot of ways to go with Wagner instead of Southee, but he proved me wrong, and I'm happy to say that. I mean, he conclusively proved me wrong. His performance along with Jamieson was absolutely outstanding, completely out bowling the fast bowling counterparts that they had in India. So I don't have a problem with Tim Southee, and what he delivered for us in that Test match at all. And over a long period of time, I don't have a problem with Tim Southee either. He's probably at the moment, as we speak, gone well past Bolt to be the second best bowler we've ever had in this country.
The other standout, of course, was Kyle Jamieson, and that's one of your boys, Mike Hesson, was one of your boys. I don't think you retained him in that IPL. But Kyle Jamieson, he is now the fastest to 50 Test wickets for a Kiwi, beating Shane Bond by a couple of Test matches. He is quite something. 3 for 40 and 3 for 91. What did you make of his performance, given he hasn't had a lot of cricket up until this point?
Well, he hasn't had a lot of cricket, and he's never played a Test match in the subcontinent. So I thought it was a phenomenal performance. I mean, I think you can look at statistics and say, yes, Indian batsmen struggle from bowlers that have a really high release. And I mean, statistically, that's pretty obvious that you need to play a tall bowler at some stage to get bounce. But that's all very well. But if you haven't played in that type of heat on those conditions, with a different ball than you're used to, all of those different variables, for Jamieson to bowl as well as he did was exceptional. And I'll agree with Smithy. I'm a massive Neil Wagner fan. To be fair, I would play him anywhere because I think he keeps running in. But the reality is you've got to leave somebody out. And I think that Southee's record in Asia, averaging 21 with the ball for an overseas quick across 10 years of bowling in the subcontinent or over that, is phenomenal. So the fact they've gone with Jamieson, you can't disagree with that. For me, it's whether they can get Wagner into this lineup in Mumbai, because I think that our seam bowlers are as good as anyone in the world. In fact, they're top of the tree. So whether you want to play spin, and I'm just not so sure you need 3 spin bowling options against an Indian lineup in India, especially when your quicks are that good. And Jamieson showed that, as I said, as long as he's fully fit again and he's able to back up, as I said, he'll get far more bounce than he got in Kanpur in Mumbai, so he could be a huge threat in this second Test match.
What did you make of our spinners, Smithy? Ajaz Patel, Rachin Ravindra, obviously on debut, as I mentioned before, and Will Somerville. Do you think they did enough to keep their places in this next Test match?
No, it did in the sense that the game never got away on us. They didn't get plundered all around the park. From where they'd come from, 2 of them in particular, without any match cricket out in the middle, I thought it's a little bit understandable. So I cut them a bit of slack there, but as a unit, pretty much ineffective compared to the very much more accomplished trio that India have got. I think it's almost an unfair comparison. But for the job they were asked to do, and that is not to contain, was to get people out on a surface that they believed would turn and give them assistance, it was a fail, wasn't it? I mean, if you look at it, 2 of them never got a wicket in the overs that they bowled, and the other guy bowled a lot of overs in Patel to end up with, I think, 3. I mean, without Southee and Jamieson, we would not be sitting here talking about a drawn Test match at all. So, I think they underperformed, but there are reasons why they underperformed. Whether you say to them, right, you've had a game under your belt as a trio, let's get to Mumbai and start all over again, I'm not sure. I'm absolutely not sure whether they would do that, and whether the Wagner factor comes in heavily over the top of any one of those 3 for me.
Smithy, Will Young, 89 off 214 balls in that first innings, his first Test match in India. He was unlucky, as Hess mentioned there, in the second innings. But did you like what you saw? Because that innings, for me, he just looked so assured and so confident in very unfamiliar territory, I guess, over in India. And there was something about it. I watched him, and it was easy. It was a very easy watch. He didn't look uncomfortable at any point, I didn't think.
I think easy is a good word, because he made it look easy in that first innings when he was there. He looked compact. He looked assured. He didn't look intimidated by players around the crease. Really good signs there. Built on what he'd done in the Test match in England. He's good. I mean, he is. We're really good in that area with a backup player of his capabilities. You put Conway back in there when they get home, and all of a sudden, this is some special top 6 or 7 that we've got floating around the scene. I like what I saw in Will Young. I just like the way he looked out there in the middle, and I like the look of his defence as well, which is hugely important. So And let's not forget, he made, along with Latham, a big mistake in the second innings. He wasn't even out in the second innings. That ball was nowhere near the leg stump. So if he's learnt anything out from this whole thing, is to back yourself and back your position in the side to have a fly. If you get that situation in the bat and you're batting top at the order and you believe there's genuine doubt, take that option. You're good enough, Will Young, to use it up.
Hess, were there any red flags from the New Zealand side for you? Any concerns you have going into the second test?
I just think for me it's just the balance, and it's whether it's what New Zealand's best bowling attack is to win the test match. So for me, I just hope they arrive in Mumbai, they look at the surface. I think it's going to be red soil. So red soil, there's generally a lot more bounce and more turn. We'll do it a little bit quicker, but there'll definitely be more bounce for all of the bowlers. And even from a batting point of view, you can score a lot quicker. So I just hope they look at that and they say, look, as well as Rachin Ravindra did, and I'm a massive fan of him, and I think he should play a huge part in New Zealand and could potentially even be that spinner in New Zealand where we ask him to do a different role. But do we need an extra seamer in that role? And if you don't do that, then as I said, you've got to make a call over which spinner you might leave out. So whatever it is, we can't look at what India do. We have to look at what our strengths are and how we can go about it. Look, our middle order, I mean, Tom Blundell, for me, batted a long time. He looked settled. He looked like he could stay there. But he needs to create and apply a little bit more pressure to the opposition. And I think that's what you have to do and get that advantage. Otherwise, you're just a sitting duck. And that's what's going to happen throughout the test match. Same with Henry Nicholls. I mean, he hasn't played a huge amount in the subcontinent in recent times, obviously. But those guys have to be proactive, because once the ball gets to that point where it's going to hold in the surface and grip, if you're just going to sit there and defend, the ball's going to have your number on it. So you've got to make things happen.
And Southee, for you, going forward to Mumbai, anything you'd like to see, any big changes in that lineup from what Hess has just said about the conditions, perhaps, in Mumbai?
Well, I think what's got to happen is that the batsmen have got to trust their bats more than their pads, and that takes a lot of the umpiring situation, if you're worried about that, out of control for a start. But what it also does is it demonstrates to the bowler that you're prepared to hit the ball, and if he makes a mistake, it's going to cost them a boundary with all those players around the bat. And Tom Blundell was the perfect example, as Hess had just said. He's a better player, more aggressive player, better player. He played an out-of-character test match role with the bat, I thought, particularly in the first innings as well. And I just want to see I want to see Taylor, I want to see Nicholls, I want to see Blundell at 4, 5 and 6. I want them to apply the bat to the ball more often and not be afraid, not sit back. This is the last test. It's not a long series. You got 2 more opportunities to be yourself. And I think that involves looking to dislodge those guys around the bat a little bit more readily, take some pressure off yourself in that regard, and just make yourself feel better. I mean, for me yesterday, if Ross Taylor had somehow had the confidence to come out and hit 30 or 40 yesterday, Ross Taylor going into the second test match would have been a whole different proposition. And his 30 or 40 may have swayed the game in a favour that thought, New Zealand, yes, we can win this game. They might have gone on to win it. That's the kind of innings you expect from a Ross Taylor in that situation. It wasn't that long ago that in different conditions as well, but still difficult conditions, Ross Taylor and Kane Williamson, through good batting and positive batting, took India apart in a run chase at Southampton for us to win under pressure. Okay, it wasn't a spinning situation, but it still was difficult batting conditions, and they took on the seamers much more so than they were prepared to take on the spinners in this respect. So I think a mindset thing amongst those 4, 5 and 6 for us is quite crucial. And I'm with Hess. Somehow Wagner has to play in Mumbai.
India strengthened by Virat Kohli coming back into the side, Hess. And what do you think he'll bring? Now he's had a little break. I mean, he's ended his captaincy role within the T20 side. He'll be feeling a little more rested than he perhaps was right at that moment, because they played a lot of cricket up into that T20 World Cup. How do you think he's going to be coming out in Mumbai?
Well, Indians love batting in Mumbai, and Virat Kohli is no different. As I said, there's a bit more pace and a little bit more bounce in the surface, so you get high value for your shots. He'll definitely be refreshed. I mean, there's no doubt that taking its toll, 6 months on the road pretty much on the bounce. So that affects everybody, especially when you've got that extra load of captaincy. So I expect him to bring that aggression that he brings on the park. It was a lot more sedate out there, other than Ravi Ashwin challenging a few things at times with all the umpires and trying to create a little bit of aggro. Virat will bring that intensity back. He'll bring an awful lot of intensity around that 5 metre circle around the batsman. And he'll also set more attacking fields and more random fields at times. So he won't let the game drift. So I think that's one thing that we'll see different in this Test match.